Currently, from a sales perspective of me directly on the phones closing deals, I've roughly done around, I haven't done the exact numbers, but it's around 30-ish million in sales. That was in two 8-figure businesses, not my businesses. Again, I was an entrepreneur, so I was getting paid primarily commission only. So live or breathe the sale. If you don't get the sale, obviously you don't get fed, don't get food on the table. Uh, so through that period, I learned a lot regarding like what works, what doesn't work, but also most importantly, like what works for me. As I mentioned earlier, the Jordan Belfort, hurrah, like very hypey sort of sales is definitely not my personality and not my go-to. And fortunately, you don't have to be like that in sales. I'm naturally more introverted. I prefer not to talk, but again, once I get rolling, sometimes I can be hard to stop. But in a sales setting or sales scenario, I would much rather do 10-20% of the talking and ask a ton of questions and help navigate the conversation, navigate the prospect to their own answers, to their own conclusions, where by the end of the call, they are saying, yes, I want to work with you. Because if you can get a prospect to sell themselves, then like obviously that's the aim of the game. I remember there was a quote I heard from Les Brown very early into my sales career, which was a person convinced is of the same opinion still. So that's why I've always, not the only reason, one of the reasons because I feel very uncomfortable with it, but I've always lent away from hardcore objection handling, hardcore sales strategies, and like high pressure stuff because not only one, I've seen companies and people operate that way, and their churn rate of clients on the back end is horrendous. Because again, tying back to that quote, a person convinced is of the same opinion still. So our objective is to get the client to or the prospect to sell themselves, and for us to be the facilitator of that transformation for them. We're like the guide taking them from point A to point B, plugging the gap between where they are and where they want to be. So to start off again with that top level, sales is a very mindset driven game. Just like if you're an elite athlete, I know if you guys follow soccer at all, but you've got like the top of the game with like Cristiano Ronaldo, and then you've got and Messi, etc. Then you've got all the players beneath and in between, all the way down to the amateurs. The guys that are consistently at the top have something going on in their brain that just keeps them at that top level. They're high performers. But you probably all know in some sport, high performers or a athlete that for whatever reason they go off form, they go off their game. And in basketball, I think it's referred to like as a hot hand when they're on, and then a cold hand if they're off or something like that. Not that I'm a basketball fan, but that can happen in sales as well. Not only from like a performance perspective, but energetically, if your mind's not in the game, and that can be due to a matter of reasons, whether it's external circumstances, whether if you're selling for someone else, you might not have the belief in the product or the service, if you just don't have belief or confidence in yourself, etc. All of that will come through in how you sell. It will affect the language you use. It'll affect the way that you demonstrate yourself, your tonality, the overall energy that you bring forward. And then for some reason, it sounds a bit like woo-woo, and I know Chris is very much more on the scientific side than the woo side, but if your energy is off, you seem to just attract really off people as well, like people that just vibe with a different energy. And it can really become a struggle in sales. I remember in my first sales gig, it was almost uncanny where like there would be one objection that I would consistently get, and then I would work out how to pre-handle it and overcome it. And then another one would pop up. And it was just like when it rained, it poured. If I was getting that objection once, I just consistently got it over and over again. And the more I did analysis into the work I was doing, a lot of it tied around my own beliefs around my self-worth, around money, around what I thought was valuable, not what the client thought was valuable. All of these things would come out in the way that I was communicating, especially if I'm selling, say, a high ticket service, and you guys being coaches would probably be selling something in the vicinity of 2 to 5 grand, maybe more, depending on what sort of packages you put together. And if you don't have the belief, which we'll go into as well, that what you do is worth it, then you're going to find it very hard to obviously get someone to pay that. So few things that will help is shifting the mindset. One of the biggest analogies and correlations that I found that's really helped is sales and dating. They are very much the same. Obviously, I can only speak from a guy's side, so not from the girl's side, but from a man's side, I typically found in my younger days when I had a full head of hair and was 10 years younger, that the harder you chased, the more eager you were, the more, like if you were texting girls multiple times without any responses, etc., the more they didn't like you, the more they disappeared. But the more aloof you were, the more detached you were, and the more you just cared, but you were like there, but like, if this works out, great. If it doesn't, like, I'm not married or attached to this dating situation at the moment, the more they seem to want you. So I don't know if any of you guys have had that experience as well when it comes to the dating scene, where if you just are over eager, it just, like, there's only a couple of guys on here, Chris and Matt. So you guys might, or the girls might have found this on the other side, where it's like just really off-putting if a guy's like blasting you 5 times a day with text messages and like, man, just leave me alone, like chill a little bit. The same happens with prospects in sales. So if you are hardcore chasing prospects, being like, just following up, how'd you get on with that? Did you see the contract yet? Blah, blah, blah. All of that is like beta energy, beta, like desperate energy. And there's an old saying around like commission breath, where when a salesperson desperately needs a sale, you can almost smell the hunger for commission on their breath. So when it comes to sales, we want to take the same approach that we would take when it would be, say, a dating situation. We don't want to make it easy. We don't want to just be the pushover, the rollover that's just hanging around desperate, like people can treat us like shit and we're still happy to have them on board. Same with prospects. If they treat you like shit, like, put your boundaries up, know what your worth is, etc. But that doesn't mean also, like, don't be a dick about it. Like, you still need to be nice, considerate, etc. But it's finding that happy point of tension where there's like that attraction between two opposites, or two, what's the saying, opposites attract, where there's going to be like a healthy level of tension between the two parties. That's the level of tension we want to hold with prospects as well. And that's where sort of the magic happens. Whereas, again, if we're coming across desperate, overeager, like we need the sale, they don't need us, then that's when it's going to fall apart. Whereas the reality is, and there's a great book that I'll share in a sec by Oren Klaff, where he talks about price framing. If you guys, again, do have belief and confidence in your ability to deliver transformation and your ability to deliver results, at the end of the day, you're the prize going into that relationship. They're the person that has a problem and an issue, and obviously they've got value to bring to the relationship as well. In a coaching sense, it's money. They're going to pay you for your service. So they've got that value to bring. But the change and transformation that you can make, you've got to have confidence that is worth more than the money that they can bring, because then you'll have confidence, obviously, to know that what you're bringing forward is worth more than what they're delivering. Now, that's something that I've always tried to do with my clients is, and Chris just hinted at it then, is like, I go above and beyond because I want him to feel like what he's paying me is a bargain. Because if he knows what he's paying me is, or he believes that what he's paying me is a bargain, he's going to stick around and he's going to be a great long-term client. Whereas if I was stinging him here and there and cutting corners and being like, and trying to either save myself time or money at his expense, then that relationship's not going to obviously bloom and blossom into something great. So that's one mindset that has really helped me, not only in sales, but as an entrepreneur as well. But the other big thing, again, it comes down to belief. So without having any belief around what it is that you are selling, and it doesn't even need to be necessarily around what you're selling, but for you guys in your position as entrepreneurs, it's almost belief in yourself that even if, like, one of the challenges I face in, say, my line of work now and the sort of services that I offer is that not everything I try works. And there's a series of experiments, etc. But I know the belief that I have is not necessarily that I'm the best and that everything I touch turns to gold. But the belief that I hold is that no matter what a client needs, I will find a solution for them. And I back myself to continue to work for them to find a solution. And if it's that sort of belief or whatever belief makes sense for you with whatever service you deliver, whatever sort of coaching packages you put together, then you'll never run into issues selling because that belief will come across to clients. And then you'll get to the point where, like for me now, for example, I don't really have to sell on calls because I don't need clients. I want to work with great people. And when I jump on calls, yes, I've got strategy, I've got structure, and I'll go into some structure in a bit as well. But I generally just want to have a conversation to find out what the gap is and if there's going to be a right fit and synergy. So, because the belief that I hold is I know I'm going to bring my best self to the table when I work with a client. And if I get a feeling that client or that prospect isn't going to do the same on their side, if they're going to drag their feet, if they're going to cause me headaches and cause me a pain in the ass, I would prefer not to work with them than receive any money for it. So because of that belief, I tend to attract really cool people like Chris and Shani and other clients that I work with. Like I'd probably say 90% of my clients now I would consider good friends. It starts off on a professional level and they evolve into friendships because they respect the work I do, I respect the work they do. We all go above and beyond for each other, and then we end up just talking because we all go through the same shit anyway, and then we just end up talking on a friend level as well. So I guess the message coming from there is check in with the beliefs that you hold around yourself, your business, what you deliver, and write something down that's going to empower you moving forward. My empowerment is that I back myself as a solution finder. I have a strong belief that whatever the problem is, I will find a solution, even if I don't find it straight away. So whatever belief is going to give you the courage or the energy to have that with clients and know that you're going to serve them at the highest level, write out a statement, do whatever you need to do to embody that belief. So a few things you can do to build belief. Visualization, obviously that's quite a common one in the mindset space. And it's not just like a mindset spiritual woo thing. There's a lot of science that backs the power of visualization around whether it's like there's been studies around people imagining lifting weights and then neurons firing to the muscles. Or I think there was a study with basketballers practicing. There was 3 control groups, one where they were taking the shots physically, one where they were doing nothing, and then one where they were just sitting there visualizing for 2 hours a day of taking the shots. And although they didn't see as much improvement as the ones that were physically doing it, they did see measurable improvement in comparison to doing nothing. So when it comes to sales, visualize if there's objections that you're getting, if there's challenges that you're going through, if you get onto calls and you're feeling panicked or not feeling calm and in control, sit with it and visualize like how you would go through. And if you've had a difficult call, sit back and visualize how you might have done things differently and how you could have pivoted and changed. And that will start to build, again, belief and confidence. Study is one big thing. Obviously, knowledge is power. If you understand human psychology, if you understand just sales in general, sales and marketing is worth studying because they are hand in hand. It will just help you feel that little bit more confident and stronger. Practice makes perfect, whether it's you in a mirror, whether it's recording yourself and listening back to yourself, or whether you have someone to sit there and practice with. Consistently practice going through objection handling, navigating conversations, and if you can get someone that likes to play difficult on the other side, even better, because then it teaches you to think on the fly and navigate conversations quickly. And then if you have the opportunity, feeding off others, that's one of the things that really helped me in the early days where I was in an office, was I got to sit, listen, and learn to people who were better than me. Not always available, obviously, if you're working for yourself or if you're working from home. But if you can get around people as frequently as you can, obviously, Chris and Shani run a lot of events, getting along to those events, going along to other business-orientated events, getting in communities, etc., share offices, where you can just hear people communicate, go about their day, see how they pitch. If you go to events, listen to how the people on stage pitch, understand and try and digest, like, oh, at this stage they were pre-handling objections, and then at this stage they were opening a loop so that it could keep me hooked until the end. And then it did keep me hooked, and try and find where all those positive points are around, yeah, again, just learning off others. So one of the things that is a big red flag for your own mindset and belief is if you start making excuses around sales. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some valid excuses, but there's a great sales trainer, Jeremy Miner, that some of you guys might know. And he talks about, like, he would never hang around the people that are sitting around going, oh, the leads just suck this week. And, you know, getting people across the line is just so hard at this time of year, which is a common belief now leading into Christmas. He would just stay away from all of that. Even if it was the reality, the leads might suck. It might be harder to close deals at Christmas. But do any of those beliefs actually serve you? No. So rather than complaining or going into those lower state mindsets, be proactive about it. Look at, okay, well, the lead list that I've got here is largely unqualified. Where can I go source other leads? We know it's Christmas. How can we spin a deal? How can we structure a deal that is going to incentivize people to start before Christmas, or incentivize people to commit for January or something like that? Always be proactive with it, and try to avoid falling into some of those lower states and lower mindsets that, again, just they're not going to serve you in the long term. Authenticity is another big thing that I mentioned at the start. Like, one of the things that I don't like, and that's just for me, is the hype selling, high pressure selling, etc. As you can probably tell, like, it's very much against my personality, very much against my nature. And in the first sales job I had, that was what we were trained to do. And we had scripts to follow. We had to follow them. Eventually, I got let off the leash where I didn't have to follow them. But in the early days, the boss would be over our shoulders, basically like telling us to say and holding the scripts up to us, like real micromanaging. And I just felt really inauthentic. I felt like every day I was wearing a mask. Every time I jumped on the calls, I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. And it very quickly drained my energy. And for me, it wasn't that I wanted to then give up on sales or give up on that sort of career path, but I didn't want to do it in that way. And if anyone's has experienced sales or been in that game, whether it's working within a company or maybe following just a script or something that you're given by some guru online that doesn't feel authentic or natural to you, you'll probably find yourself, even if you get some success with it, really hating the experience after a while. And prospects can feel it as well. If you're not being, like, if you're over exaggerating, like, you guys have probably been on sales calls. I imagine if you're in this space, you've probably been pitched things before and probably come across sellers that you don't know, maybe you don't know what's off with them, but you're like, something just feels really off with this guy. Like, I can smell bullshit. I don't know where it is, but I can smell something. That's typically when, like, a great sign of someone being inauthentic. And if you guys have ever found yourself in that position as well, as trying to pitch something where you either don't feel aligned to it, or you're just following an approach that doesn't feel aligned to you, it can be extremely energetically draining. Has anyone had an experience like that on whether it's sales call they've been on and been pitched, or they've tried to pitch that way? Kylie, Talia, awesome. Everyone, it seems like. Has anyone gone through that lesson that they might want to share, whether it's like an experience of their own or something that maybe really deterred them from a sales call or a potential pitch from like another company?
Before I invested in our current mentor, I was tossing up between two people, and it was actually Kerwin Ray and
him specifically.
No, Kerwin, but we were going to invest into Kerwin, but we had his head sales dude jump on. And the minute we jumped on, he said to me, "How you going, Chris? I'm John. I'm the head sales person here at Kerwin Ray. I am a human behavioral expert and psychologist expert. I'm an expert in reading people." And I was just immediately like, fuck, holy shit, here we go. And I, at that time, had done quite a lot in sales and I understood sales. And there's this part of you that even though that there's all these tactics happening, there's still that like animal center of your brain that it gets its guard up and it gets defensive. And I honestly felt like by the end that I had nearly been mauled. It was crazy. So that, I guess, that was the side of the fence in receiving it. But also too, like coming back to what you said, Sam, like I think at some point in a sales journey, like you've sold either too hard or a little too fast or a little too pushy. And what I noticed was earlier in my time with sales, if you did sell too much on someone's pain, and it's important to sell them and I guess mention and bring up their pain in some way because we're trying to move them away from it. But if you really focus on their pain and you pain sell, these are the people that are more likely to get off the call and then ask for the refund. They have buyer's remorse because you're not getting them to a place where they're empowered and they're making the decision going like, yeah, I'm nervous, but fuck yeah, like, let's do this. Like, I'm nervous, but let's do this. It's like they get off and they feel absolutely rattled and then they go, I didn't even want to do that. And then they just ask their money back.
And as Chris alluded to there with the lad from Kerwin's team, he went on and spoke about himself, which is a big no in sales. Like, it's not about you, it's about the prospect, it's about their challenges, etc. But at the same time, there's three brain centers that when you are in a sales situation or any human interaction really, that you are aiming to move your way through. The first one being the crocodile brain. As soon as you jump on a sales call, people are, whether it's outbound, inbound, whatever, there's going to be a level of wall that is up, a level of their guard that is up, that is known as the croc brain or the reptilian brain. That's the fight or flight trigger, right? And if you don't disarm, a lot of sellers will not disarm that straight away. And they're not only just not disarm it, they'll plow through it and get to the end and then wonder why they're facing a ton of objections. The next step, once you can disarm the croc brain or get past the croc brain and get them out of fight or flight, and this is probably something you guys talk about, right? I imagine in the nervous system stuff. So then there's the midbrain, which I learned all this from one of the books I'm going to share in a sec. But the midbrain is more emotional and like more connected from an emotional center standpoint. So once you are there, that is when you want to be bringing in pains and situations, etc., of where you can anchor their emotions to the pain they want to get away from, to then transition them into the third stage of the brain, which I believe is the neocortex. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, which is the logic center of the brain. So now you've lowered their walls, connected their emotions to pull away from what the pain that they want to go through. And now you need to put a logical case forward to the neocortex as to why they need to move forward with you. You can move through all three of those brain centers throughout a sales conversation. You will 9 times out of 10 never face objections and you will close most deals. But again, where most sellers go wrong is one, they either don't even get past the croc brain. They're just like trying to force their will onto you, which again is really inauthentic. So then it gets to the end and they're like, oh, I need to think about it, etc. Or they get past the croc brain, they build some rapport and disarm them, but they don't move past the midbrain because as Chris mentioned before, all they focus on is the emotion. They focus on the pain and they're just like really trying to drill into the pain and paint this really unrealistic future and overhype what they could be achieving and stuff like that without making the logical case as to why they should move forward. But when you can get all three and you can lower the walls, dig up the emotion, and then put a logical case as how they can get from A to B. Again, you'll find that 9 times out of 10, you'll never get objections and you'll close most deals by progressing that way. So, but one of the big things with sales, and this is with everything as well, is you need to take responsibility for everything. And again, sales a lot of the time will be a reflection of the rest of your world, a lot of your life. So if there's any areas that you're not taking responsibility for, I very much urge you to do it. Whether that's putting things off, blaming others for your mistakes, not following through on your commitments, all of these little things will pop up in your sales efforts if you aren't addressing these in the rest of your life. Just if you're, for example, asking people to invest in you, but you're like super stingy when it comes to investing in yourself, you're probably going to struggle to authentically communicate why the power of someone investing in themselves, right? because you're scared to do it yourself. Putting things off. If you're constantly delaying things and not following through on your commitments, you're like, oh yeah, I'll think about that, I'll do this, etc. What objections are you going to get? People saying they need to think about it. People saying they want to put it off till next year, etc. So a lot of the time, I can't remember who told me this. It was someone I was working with at one point. But a lot of the time, you'll find that your prospects become a mirror for a lot of your own internal challenges. And until you work through those challenges, as I was saying earlier, with like, it would be funny that I would get a certain objection that until I did the internal work to move through that, like one of the objections I would consistently get early on was around money, because I came up from not a very affluent family. I got into a lot of debts. I got scammed when I was younger. And when I was getting into sales, I was one of, not to toot my own horn, but I was the best appointment setter at that company. I haven't found a great appointment setter since, or seen someone that's put the numbers I put up before. And when I was setting other people up, I was phenomenal at it because I could talk about them, I could pedestal them, be a great third party advocate, etc. But then when it transitioned to me actually being the person like doing the sale, being in sales, a lot of my own internal shit started to pop up. And one of those things was around money. I wasn't confident to invest in myself. I didn't want to lose money. I was worried about getting scammed again, all this sort of stuff. So then when I was pitching, I would be like, fuck, $2,000, that's a lot of money. And I'm asking people for, and all of this stuff would be playing in my head. And of course, it would cost me sales. It wasn't until then I took responsibility for that and started investing in myself, which at the time was just a small investment into a diploma in financial planning because I wanted to understand money. So it's like, well, I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to invest in my own education, invest in my own learning. And then I think that course was $6,000 to do the diploma, something like that. And even just that little step of like investing in myself gave me more confidence to speak with more conviction that people need to invest in themselves, invest in their own growth, invest in their own education. So look at some of the objections you're getting if you guys are in sales call situations at the moment, if you have progressed to that point, and look in your own life of where you are being a mirror for those sort of objections that you're getting. And then look at where you can take responsibility for it and address it. High performance, as mentioned at the beginning, sales is a high performance game. It is, and not again, you don't need to be super intense and raw, but it's a high performance game in that it's cutthroat. You either make sales and make money and your business grows, or you don't make sales, you don't make money and your business stays where it is. If you aren't able to perform at a high level consistently, planning your day, knowing your numbers, and consistently be able to just show up as your best. And Chris, I'm sure you won't mind me sharing, like being through a rut for a couple of weeks on sales calls where it becomes more difficult to then show up, right? And actually show up and stay detached and stay authentic and not get desperate and all the things that we've spoken about before. It becomes difficult in those situations, but as like high performing athletes, even when they are off their game, they still show up, they still take the shot, they still practice every day, and they work through those ruts. That's what sales is going to be. And that's probably even more akin to being a business owner. Like if you guys are all obviously, I know this is about sales, but you're obviously all running your own businesses, coaching businesses, building towards it. You are going to need to consistently be a top performer. Doesn't mean, again, you don't have to put 12 hours, 15 hours a day in. Sometimes you do if that's what it takes. But it does mean that you need to show up consistently. You need to be you need to be organized, you need to plan your day, you need to know your numbers from a sales point. How many outbound calls or how many texts do I need to send to get a meeting? Out of how many meetings do I need to get qualified booking or get a sale, etc.? What's my conversion rate on lead to revenue? You need to know all those numbers, because if you don't know your numbers, then you're at the whim and the mercy of like prospects and just the flow of life. Whereas if your numbers, what inputs you need to do to get the outputs that you want when it comes to a sales perspective, then it just becomes a game at that point. When I was at my first gig, in that appointment setting role, I had to set 50 appointments from outbound dial calls a week with an 80% show up rate to even get commissions. So, and I wasn't on a good base, so I needed the commissions to make any sort of decent money. And I knew, okay, I knew that at the start of the week was when I was going to have my most energy because it would come from, I'd have the break on the weekend and come into the week. So I knew in that on Monday, I always aimed for 16 bookings. Then on the Tuesday, I'd aim for 14. Then I'd aim for 12 on the Wednesday. And then I knew I only need to get like 6 and 6 on the last 2 days to hit my 50. And I knew those numbers religiously. So I would write them on a whiteboard. I would be accountable to them. Everyone in the office would see, and I would just cross through them as the day went on. So if you can know your numbers and gamify the experience of sales, depending on what methodology you're using, if you're doing some form of leads, if you're doing outbound messaging, whatever way you're using to generate opportunities, if you treat it like a game and your numbers, okay, for every 50 messages I send, I get 10 people that respond. Out of those 10 people, 5 of them are interested in a conversation. Out of those 5, 2 are qualified and I get 1 sale. If I want to make 5 sales a week, I know I need to send roughly 250 messages a week on average. So just knowing your numbers gives you power and control over the flow of your business and over the flow of your outcomes. But if you don't know that, again, you're at the mercy. And mental preparations, I probably don't need to lecture or go through this for you guys on this. I'm sure you get told this quite frequently and you guys probably embody it as well. So mental performance, mental preparation, keep yourself at the top of the game. So I recommend a book list of some of my favorite authors. There are there's mainly 2 marketing books in there, but I do recommend that if you are going to do any form of selling, to learn the marketing side as well, because I can't remember who I heard it from, but I think it was David Ogilvy actually says that copywriting is just sales in print. So if you know how to sell and you understand the psychology of sales, it's a good chance you'll be able to translate it to marketing. That's what I did. And by knowing the marketing side as well, because marketing tends to go into a bit more depth on the psychological side than sales, you'll be able to bring a lot of that knowledge and information across as well. So screenshot this is a pretty good book, pretty good list of books. Probably the top 4 are my favorite ones, and then the rest are all pretty solid as well. So if you're going to start anywhere, probably start with those 4. So that was a lot on mindset. As I said, I wanted to start top level, and then we'll go into a bit of a process approach after this. But does anyone have any questions or any experiences they want to share when it comes to the mindset in sales, or any challenges they may have faced when it comes to sales and keeping their head in the game? Katie, you mentioned you've been in the sales game for a bit. Any lessons or things you want to share from there as well? Or Talia?
I had a question I wrote down earlier about when you were talking about sales and dating. You said you wrote down don't double text, but I've previously been told that double texting is sometimes actually beneficial because, like, what if they've missed the original message? Or I don't know. I don't know. I've been told it's good, like, not to like spam them like that per like someone like with 30 messages, but I've been told it's good to double text. Yeah, for a little bit.
After a little bit, like follow up is important, but one of the weakest ways to follow up is just following up. Hey, did you get that thing, etc. And typically especially if you do it through the same medium as well. Like, so when I wrote "don't double text," that was more meaning like, you don't hear from them for an hour, so you message them again, and then you message them again, like if you were dating or putting it onto a chick. But the same does apply when it comes to follow-ups across the board as well. So like, follow up through email, follow up through text, change your medium, change your cadence of follow up as well. Reach out to them on LinkedIn and have a reason to follow up as well. So rather than, hey, just following up, did you get my message, etc., and being a pest, have a creative way based on the conversation you had. Like, I don't know, maybe you saw in the conversation you had with them, you found out that they like snowboarding, and then you saw something on Instagram about snowboarding. You're like, oh, this would be really funny. And then you send them a text being like, hey, John, saw this thing about snowboarding. Thought you'd find it funny as well. Hope you've had a great week. Touch base soon. Just little things like that. Then even just jumping onto social media, commenting on their posts. Like, all of these are forms of follow-up, but they're in a way that's not annoying. Whereas the most annoying people from a sales perspective are the ones that just spam your inbox consistently, going, just following up with this. Did you get a chance to look at my thing? Now, here's a video to watch about how we do this and blah, blah, blah. It's just all about me versus like trying to be relevant to the prospect.
Cool. Yeah. No, thank you.
Make sense?
Yeah, heaps. Thank you.
Oh, good. Anyone else want to jump in and ask questions or share anything? Nope. Cool. All right. So we'll move on. And before I do move on, Talia, one of the books that will help with that is Pitch Anything and Flip the Script by Oren Klaff. He's very much about, like, as the title of the second book suggests, flipping the script, not being the one chasing the prospect, but being strategic with how you engage and how you stay top of mind with prospects. Because the fortune is in the follow-up, but the follow-up has to be in the right way, not in a consistent, naggy, pain in the ass way. So, all right, enough about mindset. On to process. So this is the general 5-step process I've used to close, as I said, over $30 million in coaching-based sales over the last, when did I start? 2017. So not even 10 years yet. So quite a lot of volume has gone through the system to stress test and know that it performs relatively well when performed well. Now, there are nuances through it all as well. And as I said, each section could be a full hour training on its own, but I'll just go through the top level strategy and structure of why things are where they are. And yeah, hopefully give you guys some focus points. So one of the things that I believe when it comes to sales is that educating a prospect outside of a sales environment is important. Now, previously, and a lot of sales trainers, etc., still preach this, that it's up to the seller to do the educating. Now, that was true back in 1980, before we had the internet, and the sellers held the power of information, right? Prospects didn't know, they didn't have the internet to go search around. They didn't have Google to go figure shit out. They had to go to a car dealership. They had to go to a hardware store and trust that the seller was selling them something legit. And obviously, a lot of them weren't. And that's why a lot of salespeople have a bad name, especially in the used car sales space. Whereas today, buyers are way more educated than ever before because of the internet. Now, if you think about the last time that you've probably bought something of somewhat relative value, even probably something of a relatively low value as well, like $100 or something, you've probably gone search reviews. You might have gone on their Instagram, flicked through to see if they're a legit company. You might have gone on YouTube and watched some videos about the product or the service that you were thinking about. And by that stage, then you jump on a sales call armed with all this information that previously was not accessible to prospects, to buyers. So if we're not trying to educate prospects outside of a sales process, one, we're going to waste a lot of time. We're also going to cause a lot of friction. And then we're also not controlling the narrative as well. Because if we're not providing that material for them to go and digest and learn more and go away and educate themselves on, they're going to go somewhere else and try and find that information. And that could be websites that are not, like if you guys, I'm assuming like breathwork facilitators, like utilizing breathwork as part of your coaching modalities. I'm sure if I typed in and you can type in anything on Google and like chocolate is a scam and shit will come up saying like how chocolate is a scam. I could probably go on there and type in breathwork is a scam and there will be some random person that's wrote an article about breathwork is for hippies and blah, blah, blah. And you never know what that prospect is going to go and search. Whereas if you provide the educational material outside of the sales environment, so videos to watch, if you're active on social media, if you've got a YouTube channel going, if you've just got information out in the world, there's a higher likelihood that the prospect is just going to go search what you've got out there because they're trying to find information out about you versus coming across things that are possibly going to hinder your sales approach. So I always will try and, one, educate a prospect through the front end, like content, etc., out in the world. But even when a prospect comes through, I'll send them things to go look through and to like short videos to watch, etc., so that they can just learn more about me, my thoughts, my understanding, my philosophies, etc. and start controlling that narrative, not necessarily because I want to control them to the sale, but because I want to make sure they're in alignment with me as well. Like there's nothing worse than spending a ton of time working with a prospect, like 2 hours going through, whether it's for me anyway, I'll go through audits and like I've got a lot of work to do before I bring a client on. And there's nothing worse of getting into the end of that process and realizing shit, they're actually not a good fit. So I'd rather save my time on that and give them most of the information that they need up front to start understanding how I operate. So that if they're not aligned, they can raise their hand up early and say, hey, this doesn't really suit what I'm looking for. I'm out. Because then it saves me a ton of time. Another mindset that has served me well in this process is the open door policy. I always want prospects to know that the door is always open for them to exit the conversation, to exit the interaction. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're a hostage to my, like I'm not going to let them off the phone. And I learned this in that first sales job, where the objection handling approach that we had was called the infinite loop. And we had this script where you literally would just, word for word, I can probably still remember it. It was no matter what they said, whether it was I need to think about it, I can't afford it, whatever, it was, Chris, I hear what you're saying, but we both know what you just said is bullshit, because insert case study, insert this. And if you were really serious about growing your coaching business, you would be doing it like insert next case study, blah, 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 then loop back around. So it was like holding a prospect hostage by just like playing on their emotions to, again, keep them in this infinite loop, which, as Chris said, even when, and I learned this quite early on, even if they would then eventually cave and go, oh, fuck, Sam, you're right. All right, I'll do it and go forward. A few days later, they're calling the company up being like, oh, I made a big mistake. Like I need to get a refund, etc. So I always want prospects to know that the door is always open for them to exit the conversation. If it's not a right fit, like just let me know. If it's a yes, if it's a no, just tell me. Because by me being detached and me being, like having that open door policy, they know that door's open, and I frequently remind them that door's open, but it also demonstrates that I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm not attached to the sale. So I hold on to that frame consistently. Like Chris and Shannon, or mainly Chris probably could attest to this. Like when we were looking at engaging, like I was not chasing him around at all. We touch base creatively with little things, but I let him go on his own journey and just sent him things in the meantime to go through and consume and do, like a thing that I call tasking that I'll get to as well. In the meantime, until he came to the decision that he was ready to move forward. So the first thing, this is going to be excluding like outbound calls, appointment setting, etc., because that again is a whole nother topic on its own. But once you're actually into the sales process and you've set the appointment, the first appointment you're generally going to have is a discovery session. Now, if you're doing a one call closing approach, then you'll combine this in with the pitch session. If you are doing a 2-call closing approach, then this will be a short, anywhere from 5 to 15-minute conversation where, again, for you, the purpose is not necessarily to dig too much pain with the prospect. We want to find out if they're going to be worth our time. So for me, I want to know if they actually need the solutions. Like, why did they reach out to us, or why have they decided to book a call? What's the gap? Where are they, and where do they want to be? Can I widen that gap at all? Is there things that they haven't thought about or haven't seen that I know from my experience being the expert in the situation that is going to create even more pain if that gap widens? I want to know if they're financially qualified to work with me. I want to know if they're a character fit as well. Do I actually get along with this person? Will they benefit from my work? And are they the decision maker? All of that I want to find out inside 5 to 10 minutes. And not super difficult to figure out, but there are ways to figure it out when you've got to be strategic with it. Like financial resourcefulness, for example. You're not just going to straight ask someone, do you have the money to pay for this? Because that's going to be extremely off-putting. So something I would do back in the fitness days when I was a personal trainer would be ask them, so what do you do for work? Is it sedentary, or are you active when you work? And then if they say they don't work, that would raise a flag to me to start going, okay, I need to investigate the financial side a little bit more. But if they say, oh, well, I'm sedentary, cool, is that full-time, part-time? Now I can start to get an understanding of their working situation to know if they are in a reasonable financial position. I'm obviously not going to go probing for the debt and stuff like that and be a bit too aggressive, but I know most of the time someone's working a full-time job and I'm running, like in the PT days when I was running an online fitness business, I knew my program was 1,800 at the time. I knew that most people working full-time could afford that. So I played the odds and I was willing to basically book anyone through that was working full-time. And then partner objections as well. We want to understand, we want to try and pre-handle these objections to get them out of the way before they come up at the end of a call. So finances, again, we want to know if they can afford it, creatively ask them, and then we'll go into in the pitch session how we can pre-handle that. And then decision makers as well. If it's I'll just use fitness because it's probably the most relatable. If it's a fitness-based offer, I'd be like, cool, and is your partner on this health journey with you, or is this something you're doing yourself? And then they'll say, oh, it's something I'm doing myself, but my partner's interested or something. And they might say, okay, cool. Do they support you on this journey? Like, have they been really supportive, or have you found that there's a little bit of friction there? And you might just try and explore that a little bit more so that then come the next call, if the partner needs to be on the call, you can say, hey, maybe it'd be worth your partner jumping onto the next call and then they can hear what we're going through as well. Or if they've confidently said, no, this is like my journey, this is my decision, then the partner objection's not a thing. So then at the end of the next call, if they then say, oh, I need to speak to my partner, you're like, but hold on, didn't you mention that this is your journey and that your partner is supportive of you on this? And you can loop them back to the fact that they've stated that already. So discovery session, early on, we're just trying to qualify and find out. From there, we want to, if we're doing a 2-call close, if you're doing a 1-call close strategy, then you would shift the educational part to prior to discovery. But if you're doing a 2-call close, in between the first call and the second call, have some sort of educational material that you can shoot them across, whether it's a short 15 to 30-minute training, whether it's maybe a video series, it could be as simple as a questionnaire, just something that we can give them as a task to do before the next call. One, if it's educational material, we can again try and pre-handle objections. So I'm going to use the fitness industry because I know it quite well because obviously I was in it as an example. But 2 videos I would send to prospects in between the first call and the second call was one around the myth of how being healthy was expensive. So I basically have a video that broke down like how like going out for drinks, takeaway, etc., how much that was actually costing them to move them further away from their goals. So it was framed as an educational piece, but I was using it as a collateral to help me again overcome the financial objection in the next call. I would also have another video around the importance of having a supportive network because I knew the partner objection popped up quite a lot. So in that video, I would educate them on ways to enlist their partner on their health journey so that then again on the next call, I could talk about what we went through in those videos and said, hey, did you have that conversation with your partner before you jumped on this call? And then if they didn't, at the start of the call, I can start to pre-handle the objection before we're at the pointy end when we're trying to pitch. The other thing that doing this and giving your prospects tasks to do throughout the sales process does is it creates more emotional buy-in into choosing you as the preferred vendor for whatever service that you're going forward with. So, for example, there's a psychological phenomenon called the sunk cost fallacy, where basically like if you've spent money on something, you're more inclined to continue to spend more money on it, or you're more inclined to go out of your way to do that thing. Like, for example, if you buy a concert ticket, but then it's pissing down with rain outside and the weather's shit, you're like, I've already paid $100 to go to this thing. Fuck it. I'll find a way to get there. You find a way to make it happen. We're trying to create that same effect with prospects by getting them to put emotional energy into us as a solution so that by the time they come to us, like they've put 15 to 30 minutes into watching a training that we've put together. They've spent 15 minutes with us on a previous call as well. They've probably done some research. So by the time they actually get to the pitch, they've probably spent a few hours just investigating you, your brand, what you're about, etc. So that by the time you actually pitch and it's like, as long as there's alignment and you can help them get the result they want, then there's a higher likelihood or a higher chance that they will go with you because of the sunk cost fallacy. The comparison to, say, another vendor that they haven't spent that much time with. And there was a study on this done by Google that mentioned on average a prospect will need, or a buyer will need, about 7 hours of consumption across 11 touch points and 4 different mediums to make a buying decision. That was a study done in 2018, I believe, done around most like e-commerce companies and stuff. So across that, what we're doing by this is just building more hours, building more touch points, building more buy-in to us as a solution to their problems. So before I go forward from discovery and educational content, does anyone have any questions on any of these concepts? Nope. Cool. All right. So if you want to check out the Google study, it's online somewhere. Just Google 7-hour study, something like that. And it'll be out there. But the more you can build that up, the more confidence you'll have with prospects. And again, this can be a super valuable tool to pre-handle objections. So if I give this as a live example so from this 5-step process, this was the first time me in sales took a business to 8 figures, or generated 8 figures in sales. I was with a guy called Jay Piggin. He was a fitness influencer at the time. And when I joined the business, it was just under $1 million per year in revenue. By the time I left the business, we were selling we'd closed about over $10 million over the space of the next 12 months. And I, as the sole salesperson in the company, was averaging roughly around 200 to 260K per week worth of contracts, which on a 10% commission rate was very good for me. And the discovery call was super quick. So I was doing outbound calls. So I'd call them up and they'd be like, "Hi, is that Chris?" "Yeah, this was Chris." "Hey, Chris, this was Sam calling from JPig and Coaching. Just a really quick call, mate, as we got your interest in looking at various ways to take your fitness business online. Was that something you were serious about?" We'd jump straight to the chase. They would normally go, "Yeah, it was," or something like that. And then I would do a short discovery, financially qualify them, remove the partner objection, make sure that there's enough of a gap, obviously, for us to work with them. All that would be done in 5-10 minutes. Then I would send them this educational piece afterwards. So, cool, Chris. Well, it sounds like there's possibly some potential for us to help you take your business online and work together in that capacity. What we should probably do from here, I'll send you across a recorded training from Jay that he did recently that basically goes through the system step by step on how we're helping fitness professionals do that. So that way, if it resonates with you, awesome, we can schedule a further call from there. So I wouldn't schedule the first call I wouldn't schedule the pitch on the first call, but up to you which way you would do that. But then I would say if it doesn't resonate with you, then we can not waste each other's time and not bother booking another call. Sound good to you? Yeah, sounds good. That video went for 3 hours. So we're getting people to watch a 3-hour video in between the first and second call. So I pre-warn them and say, like, pre-warning, man, this does go for 3 hours. You could probably skip the first 30 minutes, but the rest is important. Do you think that you could get that watched in, say, today's Monday? Do you think that you could get that watched by Wednesday? And most of the time, they're like, yeah, I could get that watched by Wednesday. Awesome. So if I touch base with you on Wednesday, if all looks good and you resonate with what we do, we'll schedule another call from there to discuss how this can work for you. If it doesn't, again, and I totally get it, Jay doesn't resonate, so I'm using the open door policy. Jay doesn't relate to everyone. He's pretty intense and pretty full on. So if you just don't relate and resonate with how he operates, just let me know. No hard feelings, and we'll call it a day. Sound good? Sound good. Cool. So then open the door. They know to exit. So then when I come and follow up on Wednesday based on their commitment, my numbers were on average for every 20 leads, I'd speak to 5. 2 would agree to watch the training. And then out of those 2, both would generally book. And we close at 86% after watching that video. If you watch, even if they sunk an hour and a half into watching that, it's pretty big commitment. So they were pretty well sold from there. So then we would go into the strategy session. The strategy session would only go for about 30 minutes for me on average. And a lot of the time at the start was focused on pre-handling objections and fact finding. So the worst time to try and handle an objection is at the end of a call. That's when emotions are highest. If we relate back to the croc brain, midbrain, neocortex, the croc brain flares right back up at that point, especially if they've said, I need to think about it, can't afford it, I need to, maybe I do this next year, whatever. That's their fight or flight coming out with just random knee-jerk responses to try and get off the phone because they're scared, they're in that fight or flight mode, and they don't trust you at that point. Then trying to handle that objection, you've got to go through all the brain stages again. You've got to try and calm them down. You've got to get them out of it. Like, it's a lot of work to try and get someone into that state. Whereas if you can pre-handle all of these objections away from the point that you're asking for money, you're going to find it much easier to like pluck out and remove the core objections earlier on, such as the financial objection. Speak to them about their financial situation earlier in the call. So depending on the niche or demographic, if it was fitness, for example, ask them about their work. Ask them if they experience financial stress, like how are things at home, etc. So how are you navigating that conversation with your partner around it? How much are you spending? Do an inventory. If you've created a video that covers the financial side, how did you go with that training around the financial side of living healthy? Oh yeah, it was really good. Did you see some areas that you were possibly overspending that are keeping you further away from your goals? Yeah, I noticed that I'm spending way too much on takeaway. I'm spending way too much on alcohol. Awesome. How much are you roughly spending on those things? Well, I worked out that I was roughly spending about $75 to $100 a week on things that were keeping me stuck. Cool. Mental note. I know that my program is roughly $100 a week. So now when it comes to going into the neocortex, I can make a logical connection between, so let's reallocate those funds that you've been putting into alcohol and takeaway into this program so that we can help you get to those results. Now there's a logical connection and it's, again, no objection. So I've removed the financial objection by digging into it earlier in the call when their emotions are at a lower state. Same with the partner objection. Is there any, who's pitch actively doing sales calls at the moment on here? Chris and Shani. So Chris, we've been through a few objections recently with some of the ones you've been getting as well. Do you want to share an example of like how you possibly started to pre-handle objections and try and pluck them out before you get to the end of the call?
Yeah. So when Sam talks about like inbound versus outbound, if you don't understand these terms, like inbound are leads that you typically are talking to through your social media, they're coming in organically, and outbound is more, they're coming in through paid ads. So outbound is always a little bit more difficult because they're a bit colder. And so what we've noticed lately is one of the ads that we are running is a VSL, which is a video sales letter. And basically what it looks like is they see the ad and they have to answer a bunch of questions to get access to this free training video. And the way that we've framed it, it's an application per se. So when I reach out to them, they either book themselves a call or I book them on a call. One of the biggest objections that we started getting was, I need to think about it. And Sam was saying about this rut that we've had, like the last 2 weeks has been a lot of trialing and testing, because when we first started the ads, we started flying, like it was amazing. And then the last 2 weeks, we were getting a high no-show rate, that people just weren't rocking up to the calls. And then if they were on the calls, then they would be like, they were treating me as if I was some fucking information gathering session. And I'm like, this is not what this is about here. So what we had to do was we had to switch the frame and put some things in place and implement like a 2-part close, because I was trying to close on the first call. And so the first call was gauging seriousness around where they wanted to go with this, how ready they were, and asking the questions around money, asking the questions around partners early on, and not avoiding those questions. I think it can be really common for us to just like want to dig our head in the sand and get to the part where we can just offer them the thing and hope that they'll say yes. But you're far better off, as Sam said, just like ask those questions early on. So for us, what we've done is we've added extra steps. So with my calendar, they have to, after doing the application, they then have to then answer questions on my Calendly link. They have to answer the questions or they cannot book a call. And then once they've booked the call, then I send them another 6-minute video that talks about what we do. And I'm like, you have to watch this, because if I'm going to ask you questions on the call, and if I find out that you haven't, we're going to have to reschedule. And so as a result, we are getting people that are way more warm on the call. And Funny enough, I can close them sometimes on a 1-part call just because they are so much warmer and we do have them there, and we've put the things in place to weed out the people who are what's called tire kickers. And you're going to get tire kickers in sales. That tire kickers are interesting people because they tell you everything they want to hear, but they have no intention of buying your shit. Nothing. And you sit there going, yeah, like they were awesome. We were so aligned. They were great. They've just got off the phone. They're going to ask their partner, and then you don't fucking hear from them ever again. And so I did a sales training once, and he said, tire kickers tell you everything you want to hear and then they don't buy. And sometimes the person that you think is stalling and is not going to buy is the person who's actually going to buy. So you got to find those people early on. So that's just a couple of things that Sam and I have been working on the last couple of weeks. And I would say that like at the start of your journey, like of course you're hungry to close deals and make profit in your business. But at the same respect, you can waste a lot of time on calls with people who are just there to gather information, or they're not ready. They want to be ready, but they're not ready emotionally. So yeah. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sam, if I missed anything.
Yeah, and it just, I guess, like being confident to, and this again ties all the way back to the beliefs and the mindset at the start, like being confident to bring these things up early on. If any of you guys end up getting the book Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff on the recommended list, he talks about frames and frame control. And there's a series of frames, and basically the philosophy or the theory around it from a psychological standpoint as well, and not like he's the one that goes through the crop brain, midbrain, neocortex, etc., is that can only be one dominant frame in an interaction. And it's either you create that dominant frame in the interaction. So you are the authority, you are the person, you are the expert, you're the one that has the solution to the problem, or the prospect's the one that creates the dominant frame, meaning they're the one that holds the power because they have the money. They're the one that's going to be the one deciding if they buy from you or not, etc. And whoever's frame comes out on top is generally the one that's going to win the conversation. And if you find that you are getting a lot of people saying, I need to think about it, treating you like an information center, like Chris was getting treated for a couple of weeks, it's because their frames are dominating over in this case, Chris's, right? So they didn't have respect for his time. They didn't have respect for his expertise. They didn't have respect for what he could do for their life. Therefore, they thought, or their perception was that they were just there to find out price. They were just there to decide if I want to do this, yeah, like I'll think about it, but they probably weren't going to buy anyway. Versus when we flip that script, even just the little things by like adding the questions into his calendar so that people can't book before they get there. Now they actually need to think before they move through. Like, do I actually really want to talk to this guy? He obviously seems busy because like if he wasn't, he wouldn't add all these extra layers for me to get to him. And then the way that you handle the conversation, like coming out and talking about in a creative way, talking about their finances, unplugging those initial objections, you start to set the prize frame and the authority frame of you being the prize. Like you're the one that's selecting them to work with you. You're the one that's understanding if they're going to be a good fit for your program, your process, and you're the authority in the situation because at the end of the day, they have a problem. You know how to solve that problem. And if you don't know how to solve that problem, then obviously don't pitch them, like pass them on. But if you know how to solve their problem, then you're the authority. They need your help. And if you hold that belief strong in your gut, your heart, wherever you want to hold it, then you'll be able to set those frames confidently so that, again, by the time you get to the end of the call, all the objections should be gone and it should be a straight yes or no. And something I used to do, I don't do it so much now because I pre-handle a lot and etc. But when I was not as good at pre-handling the objections, I would say at the start of the call, like at the end of the call, Chris, there's going to be generally one of three answers that you might give me. One being a yes, like we're moving forward, which is awesome if we're aligned. Super looking forward to working with you on that. One could be a no, which is also awesome because I don't want to waste your time or our time. The third answer that sometimes people give me is a maybe. And typically when someone gives me a maybe, it's a disguised no because they're worried about hurting my feelings or something. Now, mate, I'd rather us finish this conversation on a yes or a no, not a maybe. Just tell me straight out if it's a no because you're not going to hurt my feelings. Does that sound fair? And that again, I don't do it as much now, but for prospects where I was finding that I was getting treated like an information center for a bit, it eliminated a lot of that because they knew from the frame, like, we're either going forward or not. The door's open if you want to say no, I don't care. But if you think we can solve your problem, then awesome, let's move forward. So that's all just one section. Again, like as I said, all of these could probably go for an hour on just one one area. But then we pivot out into the prescription. So that's where a lot of this educational videos and content comes in handy. So, because then you've done all your fact finding, you've handled all the objections. So then you might pivot into, so Chris, obviously you've gone through the videos and looked into a bit about what we do and like deliberately throw ums in there and ahs, just like slow through the process just to sound human. But so you've gone through the videos and we've been chatting for a little while now, man. Do you feel like you've got a pretty good understanding of what we do, or do you want me to just walk you through step by step how the process works? And they'll always say, oh, can you just walk me through how this works? And that's when you go into prescription. So then you will prescribe the step-by-step approach that they need to take, or like what your process is. And I highly recommend breaking your process into some sort of step-by-step formula, whether it's like first we break down, then we break through, then we build up, or whatever your process is. Have some sort of systemized approach as to how you get prospects result or clients results, because then you can walk them through, okay, the first thing we're going to do is this, second thing we're going to do is this, third thing we're going to do is this, and then finally we're going to do this, which is going to get you to here. Now the prospect knows that you have a plan and you're confident in that plan. Whereas if you're like, well, I'm going to get you set up in the membership area, and then you can start going through content, and then you can, like, you're just all this wishy-washy stuff, they're just not going to have confidence in the outcome or your ability to deliver it. So prescribe the solution and then just make sure you tie in all the fact finding and all the pre-objection handling. Tie that information into the prescription. If they've told you that they're really bad with technology, highlight how you don't need to be good with technology through the prescription. If they mention like, oh, I'm super tight on time, when you're going through the process, like, and Chris, you're going to love this because you only need to spend about 10 minutes a day doing this. Like if it's logging your food or something. So you need to spend about 10 minutes a day logging your food, and it's going to give you a complete understanding of your macro breakdown and blah, blah, blah. So you're tying all of the, again, pre-objection handling, all the potential objections, all the things that they've said they're concerned about through the fact finding into the prescription, so that then by the end of it, you'd be like, so Chris, mate, does that all make sense to you? Like, do you have any questions on that? No, that makes sense. Is it ticking boxes for you, man? Yeah, no, it really is. And if it's not ticking boxes, I want to find out then and there, again, not at the end of the call. So if I ask him, so Chris, is that all kind of ticking boxes for you? Yeah, it is. What really stands out to you? Oh, I love this. So I'm trying to get him to start selling himself throughout, again, before I've even got to the pitch. So then if I want to go even deeper on that, like I continue to just like pull on all these threads that I just ask a question, what stood out to you? What'd you like? And then just continue to pull threads deeper and deeper, so that I just get him talking about all the shit that he likes about what we do, so that by the time I get to like what the investment is and what the next steps are, he's sold himself on the idea that this is the right thing for him. So then we go into finalizing the deals, like pitching the price. And after I've gone through all like the pulling the threads and him selling himself, etc. Like, so Chris, it sounds like everything's ticking the boxes on your side. Just to let you know where we stand or where I stand, you definitely tick the boxes for someone we would typically like to work with. Now, I'll jump into the price in a sec, but did you have any more questions about how the process works before we go into that? No, it all makes sense. Cool. So price aside, everything still ticks the boxes for you. Yep, everything ticks the boxes. What's the price? Cool. Now I can go into the price confidently knowing that he's told me that all the boxes have been ticked on what he's looking for. So then if he says, I need to think about it, if he says, I need to anything, but mate, you just told me like it ticks all the boxes. So the only thing that it can be is a price objection. So then I can always circle it back into the price. But again, 9 times out of 10, if you've done this well and done the neocortex, like done like the little connection point, use the neocortex, use the logic to tie in what it is that you've plucked out of their budget from the start. It's like, again, if I use the fitness example, so I plucked out that they've told me that they were spending an extra $100 a week on shit that's keeping them fat. Then I can go in and say, cool, man. So I Our program is 5K in total, breaks down to about $100 a week over the course of a year. And in that time, or 6 months, or whatever the price point is. So the simple approach for us would be probably like reallocating that takeaway and alcohol budget that you've been putting in and putting it into this so that we can start helping you move towards whatever he's told me our goals are, that 30 kilos weight loss or so on and so forth. So, and then the next steps from here would be to get you set up, go through that, blah, 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 whatever your onboarding steps are. So mate, do you have any questions with that, or are the next steps pretty clear? Cool. All right, so moving forward from here, and then you can use whatever closing line you want. Like obviously there's a million and one closing lines. Like the typical one I'll normally go to is like, so Chris, the next steps from here are this. Should we move forward from here? Or where should we go from here? One of those ones. And then most of the time they'll typically move forward. If not, again, I know it's a price objection because I've unplugged everything else. Then I like to get the agreement signed. I like to get a deposit on the call, finalize everything then and there. So then it's just, I'm not chasing shit around afterwards, because that can get super time consuming as well. Unless it's like in my current line of work, typically there's a bit more T's and C's involved. So I do need prospects to review things and stuff like that. But in your guys' line of work, in a health and fitness based thing, there's not so much like red tape and stuff. Well, there's not as much things that they need to understand. They just need to know, can you help me get from point A to B? Yep, cool. So I'd recommend doing on the phone. And then follow up. Yeah, as a hint at here, to answer your question, Talia, or re-answer your question, fortune is definitely in the follow-up, but don't chase prospects. Always have a reason for following up. So never leave a meeting without a next step either, whether it's a text conversation, whether it's a phone call, pitch call, whatever it is. Never leave anything without a next step. Even if they've said, I need to think about it and I'm not paying you anything at all on this call, I need to think about it, leave me alone. Cool. When are we catching up next? When are we going to go finish this? Always finish a conversation with a clear next step, because as soon as you leave something open-ended and you start getting into that chasing game of just following up, did you get a chance to read the contract? Did you get a chance to do this? Blah, blah, blah. You're automatically on the back foot. Whereas if you've said, okay, cool, you can't get past the I need to think about it objection, you've tried all these different angles and they're just dead set on it. Okay, cool. Definitely. How long do you think you need to think about it? Well, probably a couple of days. Okay, cool. Well, maybe let's schedule something in for Wednesday, just to have a quick touch base, see where you're at. Again, if it's not for you, like, feel free to just tell me, but totally understand that you need to go through this with whatever they've said they need to go through. How you place Wednesday morning to just touch base and see what we're doing from there. And always wrap it up with some sort of next step. Otherwise you get stuck chasing. So that's all I have.